Hello, you're listening to this week's episode of Cut Through the Noise with me, Aisling O'Rourke. Cut Through the Noise is the podcast for business leaders who want to increase sales through elevated communications and marketing. Here, we don't just talk theory, we deliver actionable insights into how you can connect with your audience and grow your brand. Thank you so much for joining us in this week's episode of the podcast. This season 8, would you believe it, of Cut Through the Noise. We're focusing on internal communications and communications within the workplace. Today, we're focusing on what is now being referred to as GDEI, Gender, Diversity, Equality and Inclusion. And it's those policies that are vital for an organization to grow. And it is so important that we bring everyone to the table when we're discussing these issues. And that's why I'm delighted to have been able to have time to speak with Seyi Agbede. Seyi is the Leadership Growth Enabler. He is a migrant to the island of Ireland, and he works supporting people in minority communities to help them advocate for themselves and become leaders in their workplaces and communities. Seyi and I discussed the importance of GDEI and how we can all become allies, whether it's as a white person in a company that needs to include more people of minority backgrounds, or even as a person with disability and understanding the privileges that we bring to the workplace and the value that we bring to the workplace. Whatever that lens may be, I hope you find our conversation today helpful. Well, Seyi, I am delighted to have you on Cut Through the Noise. You're very welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be doing this with you, Ashley.
Seyi, diversity, equality, inclusion, gender now. I know it was DEI, now it's GDEI. All of these acronyms are constantly evolving. For you and the work that you do, what does DEI or even GDEI mean to you?
Okay, thank you very much. Like you rightly said, there's so many titles or acronyms and all of that to be able to talk about this. But with the work that I do, how I like to describe it really is about asking 4 questions, right? And the questions are: who is at the table? Who is not at the table? Why are they not at the table? And the most important question for me is, what can we do to get them to the table? Now, the table we're talking about here is the metaphorical table of opportunities, table of whatever table it is you want to describe as. That's the essential thing. Who are the people that are not at the table? Why are they not at the table? Because it's important to understand the reasons why these people don't have that opportunity. And then what can we do about it? So whatever term you use to describe that is just to ensure that everybody has an opportunity at this table of opportunities. So that's how I like to describe it, whatever, regardless of the descriptions used.
Like DEI in particular, it gets bandied about a lot at the moment. It's under the microscope a little bit because, Trump is anti it. So a lot of global organizations are looking at how they're wording it to kind of get past his radar. But I think there's a feeling sometimes, or a fear, that it's tokenistic, that it's a box ticking exercise. But how important is it that organizations actually sit down and think about including everybody, bringing everybody to the table, that they do actually go and do that piece of work?
Well, like you rightly said, to be honest, for quite some time, it's been a box ticking exercise for many organizations, right? You just had to do just to be seen, to be doing that. You have, a lot of initiatives that are essentially led by just a team in the organization, right? So maybe just the HR team that handles it. But what I keep saying is, if this thing is a part and parcel of the organization, it should come from top to the bottom, right? It should be led by the leaders of the organizations, by the leaders of the nation, or whatever it is that you're talking about. So it's been a box ticket exercise, but we're living in a world, like I was saying to someone a couple of weeks back. The world is no longer a global village as we used to describe it. I now see it as a global estate, global room, where all intertwined, we're all interconnected, right? So it is important that you get to understand that we are in a diverse environment, and for the world to be a much better place to live in, everybody has to have the opportunity at the table, because together, like the acronym team always says, together we all achieve more. If you have a system that systematically gives some people advantage over the others, you will continue to have chaos in the system. You continue to have breakups in the system. To ensure that everybody is doing much better at the same time, we need to give attention to this. So for a long time, it has been box ticking for several people, but we need to get people to understand that it is for the betterment of everybody that we make sure everyone is fully catered for. Everybody has the opportunities to become the very best versions of themselves.
And I know myself, and I can say this now with the benefit of hindsight and, well, age. In my career, I have been stepped over by lesser qualified men, because I suppose they were younger, they were cheaper. It was easier to give them the promotion than to give someone else a pay rise. And sometimes it can be heartbreaking when you know that you're being excluded because of your gender or because of your salary, that you've actually been a loyal member of staff and then you're looked over for something. That's really hard. But if you're in the workplace and you feel that the DEI policies, the gender policies, whatever it might be, that they're not up to scratch, that they're negatively affecting you and your career progression, how do you broach that subject? Because I think sometimes these policies, while they're all great in theory, for the people they're designed to help, actually advocating for yourself within that space can be really difficult.
Yes, it can be very, very difficult. And I've experienced that, even personally as well, and with people that I get to work with a lot. And that's the reason why I work with minoritized communities, both gender minority, ethnic minorities, and what have you. And when you find yourself in sort of situation where those policies seem to be in place, but there's a difference between the policies and the practices, right? Some of the policies are actually not up to scratch, but even when the policies are in place, the practices are very different from the policies. How do you get to, begin to advocate for yourself and all of that? The first thing is, for whoever it is that is in that situation, understand your self-worth and your self-value, right? Understand that you have value that the organization or the world at large needs, because that gives you the sense of confidence to be able to sometimes maybe challenge some of these things, right? And there are different levels to be able to, tackle this. It's advisable to understand the nitty-gritties of whatever policies are there so that you can pick out where the errors are. It is always advisable as well to have ideas that you can offer on how it can be better. So it's not just about criticizing and telling everybody how things are going wrong, but how do you think it can become better, right? So if there are policies in your organization that you feel, as a woman, for example, you're not being promoted because of this and that, how do you think we can have a level playing field for everybody? What do you think can be done? If you can get allies with you as well, maybe colleagues that are experiencing the same thing, or colleagues outside your minority that experience that can't support you in this fight as well, because I mean the more you are, the better it is to fight such battle or whatever it is. So those are some of the things that you need to look at, but like I said, it starts with yourself, but understanding your value, and then taking it up. There are different levels it is. You can take it up at the government level, you can take it up at the community level, whatever it is. The thing you can't do is keep quiet and accept it, because when you do that, I mean, the injustices or the inequalities that are experienced will just keep spreading, right? And in my own case, what I've always said to people is, I may have been the first person to enter into certain rooms, but I shouldn't be the last to enter into that room. So even if whatever it is that I'm doing may not necessarily affect me, but for the benefit of those that may want to step into that room after me, they should have that better opportunity because of the fact that I stepped into the room.
And I think that's such an important thing to say. And we need to acknowledge that, particularly for people in minority communities, but women in leadership as well, that we climbed the ladder. We can't carry the ladder up. We can't pull it up behind us. We need to extend it to others. Like, I know myself in my own career, I have had the benefit of amazing female mentors who saw what I brought to the table and encouraged me to put myself forward, to build my confidence and my skills, and helped me up that ladder. So now I try and pay it back. And that takes time and effort. And it can at times be frustrating and exhausting and all of that. But it's important that we still do it. But for people of ethnic minorities or people who have maybe physical disabilities, and if you're in a management position and you're trying to do this work, but maybe you're a cis white male, middle class, you've never encountered these difficulties, but you're aware that it's something that you want to improve, how do you be a good ally without being patronizing? Because I think for many people, they want to do the right thing, they want to include everyone, but they're afraid of offending people by trying.
Well, so how do you do the right thing? The first thing is don't say to any of them that you understand how they feel because you don't understand how they feel. You can't be in their shoes. You can't experience what it is that they're experiencing. So what you should learn to do is learn to understand exactly or try to understand what it is that they're going through. And you can't do that without talking to them, without listening to them. I've been to rooms where we're talking about creating diversity and inclusion within certain spaces, but the people that are on the receiving end of those policies and procedures are not in the room as well. So how can you be talking about the diversity? For example, I'm talking about diversity for women in leadership and it's a room full of men. I can't feel the way a woman will feel. So it's important to have conversations, to engage the people on the receiving end of these policies or whatever, so that we can get to hear from them. And sympathy and understanding. So not necessarily sympathy, right? I don't like to use that word because it's not like they don't have the capacity. It's the understanding to know that you have just been, so if you're a man, you're just lucky to have been born a man, right? That gives you an edge over some other woman out there. If you're white middle class, you've just been lucky to have that opportunity. Understand that fact, right? There's not much you can do about that. You can't change that, but you can ensure that it doesn't limit other people that don't have that opportunity to get into that space as well. So ensure you have conversations, and while you're having those conversations, look at it from the lens of the people that are being affected by this, not from your own lens. Your own lens will probably be warped and all of that. You need to ensure that you have the mind of the people being affected by these policies. It is very, very important. The voices of those are very important. And with as little, whatever initiative it is that you can, even if it's just, you may not have the one to be able to change the whole policies from ground up, but even if it's just a word of encouragement, I'm working on this. I'm in support of what it is that you're going through, and that little encouragement can go through a lot. I mean, a lot of people feel, well, if I can't change anything about it, what can I do? I'll just sit back. No, no, there's a lot you can do about it. If it's just about talking about it, keep talking about it. That's doing something about it. Those are just a few things that I can talk about.
I would never ask you to speak on behalf of every person of colour on the island of Ireland because no one can speak on behalf of an entire population. But based on the people that you are working with at the moment and, even in your own network, how much of a concern is it that ethnic minorities are included in Irish society? Because we do have this picture of ourselves that we are the land of a thousand welcomes. And we know based on media coverage and incidents that have happened over the past couple of years that it's definitely not all roses. Does this come up amongst your own clients and colleagues?
Well, land of a thousand welcomes, the cave of culture, right? Am I right? I think
That's
so.
it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, does this come up? Honestly, yes, it does. In my own personal experience and with the people that I have had relations with, the ethnic minorities in Ireland, it is an important conversation to be had because despite what it may seem on the outside, there's a lot going on that doesn't favor the ethnic minorities. And for several years that this conversation has been going on. Recently, a report came out from the ESRI about how the ethnic minorities, especially the black community in Ireland, are more likely to be in work than the typical white Irish community. However, the black community in Ireland are more likely to experience poverty because even though they are working, even though they may be better educated, better qualified, but they are highly underpaid, and that's why they are likely to experience more poverty, right? So it is a conversation that needs to be had, and it cuts across every level. Many times we look at the decision makers, the policy makers, the government offices, and all that, but it starts with everybody. It starts with the person down the street. How do you get to ensure that everybody is welcome around? It's a simple thing as that. So it's a conversation that needs to be had. It's a very difficult conversation. Like you rightly said, I can't speak for everybody. For most people that I have had conversations with, it is a burning concern, and we need to do something about that. We really need to.
And I think we need to actually think about it more. Like Panty Bliss, during the marriage referendum in 2015, there was a line that Panty used about checking ourselves and checking our privilege. And I think, Shay, you speak so powerfully on this. Like, it is really important that we acknowledge individually the privilege that we have been blessed with, whether that's based on our ethnicity or middle class upbringing, whatever it might be. And I think if you come to the table acknowledging that, you know what, I've had a leg up in certain areas of my life, not everybody has, and this is not the experience that everybody has, that willingness to listen is so important in terms of your internal communications and even external, isn't it?
Oh, it is so important because you may not have chosen how you were born or under the circumstances to which you were born, but for some people, you were born into certain privileges, right? Acknowledge and accept that. Okay, don't dismiss it. It's there, right? And sadly, we live in the world where such privileges gets to affect other people. So either, I mean, the ethnic privileges or the gender privileges, it gets to affect how other people get to reflect and deal with the world as well. It needs to be accepted because if you don't accept it, whatever it is you can't accept, you can't change it.
Like anything in the workplace or in business, it's one thing having these policies in place, but you have to actually live and breathe them. Like I always talk about communication being a tangible skill. I fundamentally disagree with the idea of it being a soft skill because poor communication will cost you and the company business. It will affect morale within the company. And if you're going out into the world sharing your story of being an inclusive and diverse workplace, and yet your marketing assets are not diverse, or maybe your marketing assets are diverse but there's nobody of a different gender on your board or of a different ethnic minority. Like it has to be the whole way through the organization, really, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, it has, and it's so important. Incidentally, last week on the radio show that I do, this is exactly what I was talking about: communication in the cross-cultural setting. And I gave an example where I met a lady who came in from South Africa. She lives in Ireland right now. She came in from South Africa, and the first experience she had with the boss she was working with was, you need to understand that certain cultures have different mannerisms, have different greetings, different hierarchical structures, and all of that. So she came in from South Africa, where it's a heavily respect-based environment where you address the elder people or with things like SARS and Mars and all of that. And then she came and she said to her boss, "Okay, good afternoon, ma'am." And the woman says to her, "I'm not your mother. Why are you insulting me?" Because she didn't quite realize that. I mean, the boss felt she was trying to insult her, think, I mean, I'm old enough to be your mother. I'm not your mother. Why are you insulting me? But all she was trying to do was being respectful. It
Mm.
takes you to know the different cultures, the different mannerisms from different parts of the world to be able to connect, communicate effectively. And like I said, we're living in the world right now that we're so interconnected. If, even with the hybrid remote working, your members of staff may not even be in your locality. They're from a different environment. You're having a lot of call centers and all of that coming from Eastern Asia and everything. They are from a different environment. So how do you get to communicate effectively with them? Because, like you said, poor communication would lead to the downfall of the organization. It is such an important and vital conversation to be having.
I was with a gentleman the other day who was a senior HR person in a very large global firm. And he was talking to me about his communication style and how he's from the Midlands of Ireland. And when he gets enthusiastic about things, he speeds up in his speech. And he has this thing that he does after these town hall meetings, these global meetings with offices around the world, where he'll ask one or two key individuals, what percentage of what I said today did you understand? And I haven't heard of anybody doing that. But I do think it's really important. I would talk to people about when you're creating your messaging, get an 8-year old to read it because, an 8-year old will be fairly direct. And if it makes sense, it makes sense. But if it doesn't, they'll tell you. And I think that's really important that when you are in a hybrid workplace, that actually you realize that while somebody might technically have fluent English, your accent might be a difficulty. Your mannerisms, the speed at which you speak might be a challenge. So it's worth asking the question.
It is worth asking the question, even in a hybrid or remote or in-person environment, right? It is worth asking that question because communication is when what you intend to say is what has been heard, right? So a lot of times you can go ahead and do speaking and all of that, and you feel you have actually communicated what you want to say, but what has been heard is different. Now, there are different strategies to saying that, asking the question or asking them to actually repeat what you have said back to you in their own words. There are different strategies to do that, but it's important that you know that what you intend to communicate is actually what is heard.
I have to admit, if I go into a shop and the shopkeeper refers to me as love or darling, I feel so uncomfortable. And I'm smiling as you're talking about ma'am, because I do. If someone says ma'am to me, I feel old. And that's the culture that I was raised in, that these things were negatives. And I suppose it's about recognizing that they're not negatives in every house. Shay, thank you so much for joining me. What would you like listeners to take away as the key message from our conversation today?
The key message from our conversation today, because we're talking about the inclusion, and I usually say that there are several barriers that could limit you. Gender barriers, ethnic barriers. That's fine, but the most effective barriers that could limit you are the barriers you set against yourself. Now, once you believe that you are more than enough to achieve whatever it is, regardless of whatever barriers that are there, you are one step ahead of the game already.
That is incredibly powerful, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. Seyi Agbede, thank you very much for joining us on Cut Through the Noise. And if you want to find out more about the work that Seyi does, Seyi, how do people find you? And I know you have a boot camp of sorts happening in sunnier climes a little bit later this year.
Yes, part of what I do is I work with leaders across board to become better leaders and create wealth. And one of those leadership boot camps we're having this year is happening in Marrakesh in Morocco over 4 days, right? It's going to be an amazing time. We have great speakers that will be working with us there as well. And like you rightly said, if people wanted to find out more about this, I think the best would be to reach me on LinkedIn. It's my name, Seyi Agbede, on LinkedIn, and I'll be more than happy to give you more details about that or any of other initiatives as well.
Jake, thank you for joining us today. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. And that was my conversation with Leadership Growth Enabler Seyi Agbede. I hope you enjoyed our chat today and found it helpful. For me, I think it's that piece about recognizing the biases that we all bring to the table, regardless of where we come from. Like, none of us are perfect. We've all been born with a certain amount of privilege and we bring that lens to the workplace. So it's important to recognize that and then to listen, to ask how we can be more supportive, how we can be a better ally, and, to be more observant so that we can try and help ensure that our table is open and welcome to all. My thanks to Seyi for taking the time to speak with me today. That's it for this week's episode of Cut Through the Noise. I hope you have enjoyed our conversation and found it insightful. If you need help with your communications, please do feel free to get in contact with me. You can email me on hello@thecommunicationscoach.ie, and don't worry, the links will all be in the show notes below. Remember that communications is a core skill for every business to grow and succeed. So ensuring that your messaging is clear and concise and really does get through to your target audience is absolutely key for business success. Don't forget that you can check out all our episodes of Cut Through the Noise on your preferred podcast platform or over on our YouTube channel. And if you enjoy what we do here, please feel free to get in contact with us and let us know. And if you're feeling generous, give us a 5-star rating on your preferred podcast app or give us a review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that while content may well be king, clarity is key if you want to stand out from the crowd and cut through the noise. Until next time.